folks. Rocky the Raccoon's here with another clever way to make recycling fun for everyone.
Hey y'all, Rocky the Raccoon here, and I'm thinking outside the bottle. Get it? Some say outside the box. Nope, I'm thinking outside the bottle. I'm on a kick here with these water bottles. You can use those used water bottles to make a clever watering can. You heat up a needle to poke tiny holes in the cap. Then you fill the bottle with water and squeeze. Perfect for kids to water plants or rinse garden tools with. No fancy gadgets needed. I'll keep the ideas flowing with your recycled minute each day. In fact, I'm gonna go back to the thinking board. I'm Rocky the Raccoon. As always, get tips and ideas on what to recycle and how by visiting our website, recyclerightn.com.
Find the closest place to recycle near you by going to recyclerightn.com.
Whether it's a cough, a fever, or something you can't quite name, MMC Now makes care easy. Walk right in, get seen quickly, and your visit connects directly to your MMC doctor. Care you trust, with providers you know, with digital check-in and multiple locations around town. MMC Now is here when you need us.
Murfreesboro Medical Clinic.
Neighbor Network, FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna, audio and video streaming at wgnsradio.com. This is the Roundtable, a look at the news, views, politics, and people that are shaping Rutherford County.
Welcome into the Roundtable here on WGNS. Chip Walters with you from Exit Realty Bob Lamb and Associates and the Blue Raider Network. And another Wednesday, and we're in January. It's our first show of the new year, and it was a great opportunity to reach out to one of the great friends we have of this show. That would be Chris Davis of News Channel 5, who seems to always say yes when we asked him to come on to talk about whatever it might be. And in his role as the Capitol Hill reporter for News Channel 5, thought this would be a great opportunity. The legislative session will be starting in about a week, and here's an opportunity to kind of preview things. But first of all, how you doing? Did you have a good holiday? Did you do anything exciting?
Had a great holiday, spent a lot of time with family and friends, and now we're ready to seize 2026, and that means, at least for me, up to Capitol Hill starting next week.
Yeah, and you have a sister who is going on a wonderful adventure over the next couple of years, and she also has been working in television news as well.
That's right. My sister Lauren, her husband, my brother-in-law, serves in the United States military in the Army, and they are being stationed in Germany, and they move next month. So got to soak in lots of time with my sister over the holidays, and we're excited to plan a trip to go visit her in her new hometown in the coming years for sure.
Yeah, that'll be nice. Is she going to get to work with like Armed Forces radio and television or anything like that?
I think that's the hope. She doesn't have anything quite lined up just yet, but I think she'd love to do something like that for sure.
But she works in the news business just like you. Now, where did people in the news business have an innate curiosity to start with? Who did you get that from? Your mom or your dad?
Ooh, that's a good question. It might be a little bit of both. But they both will tell you that I was a very inquisitive kid, that I had questions for everything. Sometimes that was great, sometimes maybe not so much. But I think both of my parents are pretty naturally inquisitive too. So maybe it was a combination of both.
Gotcha. All right. Before we look ahead, I want to look back just a little bit. Since when the legislative session is over, you still have Capitol Hill duties, but you also work normal, regular news stories, and want to talk about some of what you think were some of the top stories in the mid-state for 2025. And I know I think about one of the ones you had to cover was out in Dixon County with Sheriff, ironically, Chris Davis, who with the explosion over there that killed so many people.
Absolutely. The AES explosion, I think, in my mind, is absolutely the top story. If you remember, it was, a munitions plant right there on the Hickman and Humphreys County line. And, it took many innocent souls in an instant. And we still have a lot of questions and specifically in what exactly went wrong. We may not know that for a long time. But one thing that was just I think so hard for so many families impacted by that was just the level of the explosion made it really hard to recover remains of the loved ones. And so I actually did a story with TBI of, them having to just find the smallest sources of that and having to search for that in such a wide field. And, that was certainly one of the most heartbreaking things I've covered, I think, maybe ever in my career, but especially this past year.
Yeah, the Tennessean this past week named Sheriff Davis their Tennessean of the year. I mean, he had to go through the Waverly floods. He had that tragedy, and then most recently, a 4-person murder suicide apparently. That and again, it seems like he is a rural sheriff who. Every time he ends up having to come on television, says, "Well, I knew the family," and it's amazing the burden that he's had to carry.
I've known Sheriff Davis. We obviously have the connection with the exact name and make that joke to each other, and joke that sometimes we get emails intended for the other from time to time. But he's a great guy, and I really got to know him covering the Waverly flood back in 2021. And I think you hit the nail on the head, and the Tennessean hit the nail on the head. Is he allows himself, which you don't see in law enforcement a whole lot. He allows himself to be emotional. He allows himself to be vulnerable. And I remember I went out to one of the press conferences for the AES explosion, and I asked him, because he warned reporters at the beginning, hey, we don't want to talk about individual families yet. We're still in the identification process. And I asked him the question, Sheriff, how many of these families did you know? And he knew quite a few, including some, his neighbor had a direct connection to that. Next door neighbor, I believe, had a direct connection to that tragedy. So it's just a great reminder. Rutherford County is often like this. I grew up in Montgomery County. It's sometimes even slightly larger counties in an area can be so close knit in so many ways, especially if you have deep family ties, but especially in Humphreys County. Sheriff Davis has had a lot to deal with, and hopefully he has a calmer 2026 compared to 2025.
No, absolutely. And you and I, we both grew up in, Clarksville was not nearly as large then as when you were growing up. I grew up in Murray County, which at the time was much smaller than it is now. It's burgeoning. The other, there's always in this area, fortunately, other big stories, and a lot of them are in the positive, because your hometown Clarksville is getting some major economic impact. Rutherford County continues to have that kind of thing, and then there is the very interesting story, I think, of the tunnel in Nashville that is being built. Have you had any? Have you had to do any stories on the tunnel as of yet, or what are you hearing on that?
Yeah, I have. I think it's a mix of, you have a group of people that are very excited about what this could mean, and then you have some skepticism of what does this actually mean, especially with the geography of Tennessee, lots of limestone and caves and sinkholes, and, kind of the questions of, does the Boring Company, Elon Musk company, know exactly what they're in for? And how much should the state be giving in land access versus what we're getting? The state would tell you, the governor would tell you, hey, not many cities get a free transportation project that doesn't directly impact taxpayers. But also, if you have a business or home through that area, given the geography, and topography of our area, you have questions. So that, I think, is another huge story. I've done a couple stories on it so far. I'm sure we will do many more as this process moves forward. But as you continue to talk to the Boring Company, they talk more and more about how this could be a much wider footprint as they move forward. We're starting with the airport, but you could have, perhaps tunnels go down towards Murfreesboro or Clarksville as more of a regional transportation effort. maybe even out to Knoxville, they've thrown that out. So there are lots of questions. And I think I do want to make a point, especially out all the way to Knoxville. They've made the caveat that their technology has to improve quite a bit based off of what they have right now. They want to be able to get it to where there doesn't have to be any human beings in the tunnel as they're boring it, and they're not to that point yet. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think there's some people that have a lot of skepticism. Will this ever even open? Others, very excited about what this could mean, especially for tourists that are coming from the airport to downtown. If that could get any cars off the road, I think a lot of us would be happy.
As a realtor, I have questions about if you are boring underneath my home, what does that do to my mineral rights? Or if I've got a piece of land, I own the mineral rights to that, and I own what is underground. So, I'm curious, are property owners, will they get any, restitution, so to speak, or have they actually even started this, or what have they just been doing testing?
As far as I know, and we're really limited to what the boring company tells us, which, usually is in the form of a blog post. They don't usually go on camera with reporters or directly engage with reporters. But they seem to still be doing the tests right now. And from what I have heard, mainly their route will be along state routes. So Murfreesboro Pike will be the main corridor to the airport.
Gotcha.
Then, of course, they have to hook over to the airport property itself. Last time I spoke to the CEO of the Nashville airport, they had not inked a deal on that yet, and lots of negotiations on how much that would cost. I don't think that would be a giveaway compared to what the state is willing to do on rights. But, when you're underground, I think a lot of questions that some business owners have is, okay, if you're purely under the road, okay, but how do you know if they veered off under your property, and what are those mineral rights? And so I think there are lots of questions, and I think that's why you do see a healthy dose of skepticism from lots of people of like, what does this actually mean?
And in this initial tunnel that they're talking about from downtown to the airport, for local residents, I don't know that it's actually going to mean that much to us as it will someone, a business traveler, that kind of thing, who may be coming in for a conference. Since it's going to terminate somewhere near the Music City Center, somewhere like that. But it's interesting, and I do have a couple of friends who have actually taken the Las Vegas tunnel from the airport into downtown Las Vegas, and they said it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll be very interesting to see what this actually looks like. The last I heard, the terminus officially is going to be in a state lot close to the Capitol, because the state has that property and be able to do it. And there are talks of it linking to Music City Center, which is obviously makes a lot of sense, especially for conferences. But I think that is kind of also part of the point, Chip, is as far as we've heard, they have not officially inked deals other than with the state. So there's not an official partnership with Music City Center. There's not an official partnership with the airport. And so if those negotiations fall through, where does that leave things to?
Well, speaking of the Murfreesboro Nashville corridor, there's been a lot of talk about the choice lanes and to try to relieve some traffic along I-24. And, Lord knows you and I both have made that trip enough to know, to try to know, when is the best time to avoid, those kind of things. What are you hearing on that project, and when do you think we might see some work on it?
At the beginning of this project, I remember talking to Butch Ely, who was at the time the deputy governor and chief of transportation for Governor Bill Lee. And he said, best case scenario, and I believe this was back in 2022 or 2023, was a 7-year project from start to finish for I-24, headed towards your neck of the woods. And so we are very still much in the midst of that land acquisition and right-of-way process. Environmental studies also have to take place. And so it could be still several more years before you actually see, the orange barrels on the side of 24. They have promised that it will be new lanes. It will not just be taking an existing lane and say this is now a choice lane. And they would actually, I think in a lot, especially kind of in the South Nashville area, would be lanes built in the median that still connect to the exits. But it's a big build out, and it's, kind of it segues well from the boring tunnel, because once again the state's whole argument on this is, hey, we are getting outside companies to build this road infrastructure. Of course, those outside companies will then be able to reap a lot of the economic benefits. State will get some, but those companies will be, paying themselves back for some of this road construction. But in the meantime, as they're building that out, when we finally do get to that phase, that is gonna cause some more traffic headaches before things get better, and you have to be willing to pay up to get around some of that traffic. So some will be willing to do that, some will not.
That's right, and that kind of goes back to the state's their stance on how they do road projects. To start with, they do not finance road projects; they pay cash. That's just the way they've done it, and that is why, one of the big reasons why Tennessee has such a good bond rating, and is considered to be one of the better led financially states. It doesn't matter which party has been in power. That has been the case for the last 50 years or more. So getting creative with, public-private partnerships, that seems like for some of these, bigger ideas, that might be a way for that to happen.
Absolutely, Chip. I mean, when the state was looking at, we have all of these lists of projects, and we have a very finite budget to do, to be able to move that list along. Raising taxes was not going to be one of the options. They're all politicians. They want to be reelected. So if you're not going to finance it, you're not going to raise taxes, then this was really, I think, the only other play in their playbook. It does take a long time for it to build out. It does, cost money to use, but the argument from the state would be, hey, even if you're not willing to pay the toll to get into the express lanes, somebody else is, and that's one less car on the road, and maybe that helps. Yeah, it's another one of those. We'll see if it pays off, but it is a unique way to tackle that issue if you're not willing to say, maybe we'll finance, or maybe we'll raise taxes.
Yeah. Another thought or two on that we'll get to in just a second, but we need to take our first break of the show. Chris Davis, News Channel 5, is our guest today. We'll be back with more on the Roundtable here on WGNS. All right, there's my marker.
Whether it's a cough, a fever, or something you can't quite name, MMC Now makes care easy. Walk right in, get seen quickly, and your visit connects directly to your MMC doctor. Care you trust, with providers you know, with digital check-in and multiple locations around town. MMC Now is here when you need us.
Murfreesboro Medical Clinic.
What's the location of your emergency? I think my kid OD'd.
Hi, I'm Craig Harris. I'm County Commissioner of Rutherford County. One of the reasons I ran for office is because I wanted to bring awareness to the opioid epidemic that's impacting our county. To stop providing this epidemic with people as we educate. We have a lot to do, and we have to come together as a community because this problem's not going away.
Well, yeah, I'll be right there.
It takes all of us to power a community, both in plain sight and behind the scenes. Middle Tennessee Electric, bringing good energy.
When the weather turns bad, minutes, even seconds matter.
This is an early heads up for southern Rutherford County.
Rutherford Weather brings you live radar and expert meteorologist insight, giving you the early heads up when storms threaten.
A lot of areas are going to see some impacts from this storm.
From analysis to live camera views, we keep you informed before, during, and after the storm.
I think the vast majority of the hail with this now is going to be quarter to perhaps golf ball size.
Rutherford Weather. Stay ahead of the storm.
Good Neighbor Events is brought to you by the law offices of John Day. AmeriCare Pest Control, and Old National Bank.
This is a paid legal ad.
At the law offices of John Day, we take only real cases that make a real difference.
The law offices of John Day took the burden really off of my shoulders.
So if you think you're going to get rich quick with a frivolous case, I'm not the lawyer for you.
I want you to know that I appreciate everything you have done so much. I know you went over and beyond.
If we're not able to help or aren't the right lawyer for you, we'll do the best to point you in the right direction. If you've been injured, call the law offices of John Day for a free consultation.
Let's check those WGNS Good Neighbor events as we celebrate our 79th anniversary. You can buy one and get one free monthly or yearly passes to SportsCom or the Patterson Community Center, now through January the 18th. And speaking of the Parks and Recreation Department, the 24th Annual Polar Bear Plunge is Saturday morning, January the 31st. The party in the gym starts at 8 o'clock that morning, and the plunge is at 10. That's Saturday, January 31st at SportsCom. And the Red Cross is still critically low on blood. Please give the gift of life. Phone the Red Cross at 800-RED-CROSS and make an appointment to give blood at a time that fits your schedule. We remember you. An Alzheimer's and Dementia Caregiver Support Group meeting will be next week, not this week, but next week on Tuesday, January the 13th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Villages of Murfreesboro. That's 4 o'clock next week, Tuesday, January 13th. Those are WGNS Good Neighbor events.
Rutherford weather.
Partial sunshine develops here this afternoon with a high into the mid-60s. For tonight, mostly cloudy. We'll see a low around 47. I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki from the WGNS Rutherford Weather Center. Currently, it's 53.
WGNS is powered by Middle Tennessee Electric. MTE's Plugged In podcast focuses on the world of electric vehicles. Stay up to date on the EV world, hear interviews with experts, and more. Listen on your favorite podcast platform or visit mte.com/pluggedin.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at wgnsradio.com.
Welcome back to the Roundtable here on WGNS. Chris Davis, News Channel 5, joining us as we get 2026 underway. We talked about some of the big stories that we covered, he covered over in 2025, and as we move into 2026,
this storm is electric.
We finished up the last
Watch
segment talking about transportation a
What's
little bit.
What's your plan to navigate these treacherous waters?
The phrase light rail is always out there, and even I keep hearing that Amtrak may put back in a Chicago to Atlanta or Nashville to Atlanta or Miami that used to be there. So, that I think, people are looking for options because, getting on an airplane these days is just, it's an all day ordeal, and they're looking for options. And if you've ever traveled by train, it is a great option if if the point to point works for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that all kind of depends on who is in the Oval Office. And I think in our previous administration, they were very pro Amtrak. I'm not so sure if that is at the top of the Trump administration's agenda. But I definitely think there's a lot of interest, especially with Amtrak connecting back through Nashville. I do know that one, complication, at least Nashville up towards kind of the Clarksville area, is part of that old rail line that ran from Clarksville to Nashville was converted through the Rails to Trails program through Ashland City, and the Bicentennial Trail took out about a 4-mile chunk of that rail line, so they'd have to rebuild or go around that or something like that. But I think at least into the Biden administration, there was a lot of talk of maybe there could be a spur, at least from Atlanta to Nashville, which would, if you've ever been in Atlanta traffic, Atlanta's an hour away from Atlanta. So, that would be, I think there's definitely a lot of interest. I think it really does depend on who's in power, and rail may not be as big of a priority for Republicans as Democrats. But, I know, at least, talking up on the Hill, there was bipartisan interest of, hey, if, any transportation effort that could benefit Nashville, I think lawmakers are willing to think about it right now.
I know I know Bill Ketron had an idea he threw out there about, elevated rail along the median of I-24 at one point, which, that's not out of the realm of reality these days when you look at it. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how these continue to move along. Now, here we are a week away from the 114th General Assembly. Will convene on January 13th. First of all, how does the number 114 come up? Is that every 2 years, or
it is it's every 2 years, and so we are actually in the second year of the 114th. So, and that actually changes the way things work a little bit. So last year, it's in many ways, the House of Representatives gets voted in every 2 years. So there's lots of usually change in the House. Senate counterparts, they're a little bit more stable. They have, they're not up every 2 years. They're up every 4. But because we're in the second year of the 114th, which has been since the Tennessee Constitution first passed and Tennessee became a state, that actually means we will actually hit the gas a little faster on the legislative session. So in the first year of the 114th, they have to swear everybody in. There's actually, you think about it with your own job, but there's actually some onboarding things for some of these new lawmakers and ethics presentations and that kind of stuff. They also traditionally wait on the governor's state of the state to really get things going in the first year of the session. In the second year, they don't wait for the governor as early as really Wednesday. Next Tuesday will still be largely ceremonial, but next Wednesday, they'll start their committee meetings up and they'll hit the gas pedal. But 2, if you had existing bills in at the end of last session, they can just pick up right where they left off this year, which means, we're not starting from the very beginning stages of the committee. There's a few bills that maybe passed the Senate, but not the House, or the House and not the Senate. And you could have some laws passed within the first couple of days. So it gets to a much quicker start in the second year of the session.
So, I'm guessing that they're each 2 years. There are 2 2-year sessions within each governor's term, basically, right?
Right. That would be right.
Okay,
that would be right.
That fall, because this one will end as Governor Lee's term will end. Now, last year was a busy session, and you've got a long list of issues after a busy 2025, and like you said, you could have a flurry of votes on the second or third or fourth day of the session next week.
You absolutely could. I think the one that people will be watching the closest, because it actually got the most pushback and protests and demonstration, is a controversial bill that would allow school districts to charge tuition to undocumented immigrants. And that actually passed the Senate, and then it stalled in the House right before the legislature wrapped up for the year. And the House intentionally hit pause because they weren't sure if it was legal or not, or whether they would get, help from the federal administration or not if they passed the law. And from what I've read and what I've heard, they still don't have a very clear answer on that. But for people that have been watching that bill very closely, because every step of the way, it had huge demonstrations, including there are a few where protests disrupted debate. I think that's one that people will be watching very closely, because it did already get across the finish line in Senate. Now, if they decide they need to change some wording on it to make it more, resistant in the court systems, then that would kind of bring things back to square one, or some changes would have to be made. But if it's kept with the same language, we could see that happen the first couple of days of session.
Has the Attorney General given an opinion on that?
Yes and no, and that's where things get interesting on this. The Attorney General has urged lawmakers to reach out to their federal counterparts to say what would be some of the protections on this, because part of the bill itself is a challenge to a Supreme Court ruling that they think that could go their way. I think it's Plyler versus Doe, which is a Supreme Court ruling that says that that every child has the right to a public education. And so part of it is a challenge to that, but there are certain provisions within that bill that may not be as resistant to legal challenges. And so the Tennessee Attorney General is not afraid to go to court for behalf of the legislature, but even he has made some comments of like, we need some clarification from the feds on this, which is why it stalled last year. And we'll see what happens with it this year.
And there are several things that, while they don't necessarily go along with it, they kind of do, like new election security with real-time citizenship verification. There's a lot of non-citizen IDs, things like that. Obviously with the Trump administration, there's been a lot of things that have come on the docket, or at least in the court of public opinion regarding immigration, whether it's voter fraud, election integrity, things like that. But and again, here we have education kind of being drug along with that, with kids.
Absolutely. And I think you will see another flurry of immigration-related bills this year, especially with, I think, state Republicans trying to latch on to some of the popularity of the Trump administration nationwide. And so another one that was kind of announced over the summer, a bill that actually came out of some of the ICE activity in Nashville over the summer, there was a perception that Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell may have maybe unintentionally or intentionally doxed some of the ICE agents by releasing some public documents that had some ICE agent information on there. They since have taken that off of the Nashville's website, but it angered a lot of statewide Republicans. And so there's kind of a bill now in reaction to that from both Cameron Sexton and Jack Johnson, the two kind of respective leaders in the House and Senate, that would say if elected leaders release information about ICE activity to the public, that they could face very stiff penalties, very stiff criminal penalties. On the other side of that, you've had Democrat Representative Justin Jones, who can sometimes tip his toe into some controversy from time to time.
No, really?
From time to time, has written legislation that would penalize ICE agents from concealing their identities with masks or obscuring name tags and that sort of thing. And so I think you will see I like to call it like national bills that have that are brought to the local level. I think you will continue to see a lot of that this legislative session.
So and so that'll be interesting to see how a lot of that plays out. Now, speaking of Representative Jones, what else does he have on his agenda going into this legislative session?
Thousands of bills are filed, Chip, so I haven't looked through all of his. Usually his do get a lot of attention, so that'll be part of my task over the next week. But I knew that one specifically because he made a big announcement about it earlier this year. But that'll be part of my homework that I do between now and next Tuesday.
Yep, exactly. And now, speaking of election security, nationwide there seems to be, it seems in particular around the last 2 or 3 presidential elections, you hear claims of one thing or another. Fortunately, and let's give Trey Hargett credit that Tennessee, and we're fortunate here in Rutherford County, Alan Farley. I'll give Alan some credit here, the election coordinator in Rutherford County, that Tennessee has really not had many issues at all when it comes to the integrity of any election, whether it's a local or statewide, or even how Tennessee handles its part of national elections. But that's still a topic that's out there.
Yeah, I think that's just I think because you have so many national headlines about that, I think you have a lot of lawmakers that are continually trying to make sure that we pass legislation that keeps that still in place. And I think the other thing that's just important to know is these state legislatures, they communicate with each other. They follow each other's lead. There are bills that Tennessee will pass that other states will then replicate and vice versa. And they go to these conferences of other like-minded state legislators and they share ideas. And then there are obviously special interests that are working bills in each state legislature. But, if you really are in tune to what other state legislators are doing, which most common people are not, but I do from time to time, you will see that, that's part of my job. Yeah, I do it so you don't have to. But, you will see kind of a flow of ideas of, oh, well, hey, Tennessee passed that. And then Alabama will do it next session, or Missouri, or whomever. And that makes it pretty interesting.
Well, I actually was on an advisory committee to Governor Haslam on a particular subject a few years ago. And we met our committee met for a couple of years, and we were developing some legislation, and that's exactly what we did. We contacted other states that had already enacted certain things to try to, get the right language and all of that. So yeah, that's certainly an understanding of how that's going. Okay. Another big topic here before we take our break, healthcare. Obviously that has been a huge story with on the federal level with the Affordable Care Act and subsidies, and you're having a lot of folks whose including my own insurance has gone up, and so that is another a big area of household expense that people are having to deal with, and they're looking now back to the state and say, how can you guys in Nashville help my pocketbook when it comes to healthcare?
Absolutely. I think I read earlier this week, and forgive me if the number's not exact, but I think I read that under new Medicaid laws that Tennessee will now be responsible for $100 million in new expenses that previously the federal government covered. As the federal government kind of continues to try to downsize it, as you mentioned, it's pushing it down to the states. And where that gets interesting, Chip, is Tennessee continues to have increasing revenue, but it's not surging like it used to. So, for especially post-pandemic, when people are, excited to be, back out and in the community, we saw a surge in sales tax revenue and other taxes that the state collected. It's still going up in Tennessee, but it's not shooting up. It's more leveling out. And lawmakers then, when they're creating the budget, the big splashy plans don't have as much room in the budget. And so then now when you have, more requirements from the federal government to be able to keep some of these healthcare programs running, it's going to cut into some of the big splashy programs. And also you have a governor that is going into a lame duck year. And so the legislature is a little bit more hesitant to do some of his projects compared to whomever will replace him. So I think that will play a big role both in healthcare itself, but then also some of the other initiatives that you typically hear the governor talk about in the state of the state, or you typically hear lawmakers kind of tout, at the beginning of a legislative session. You may not see as many of those big sweeping projects. We were talking about roads earlier. In the last couple of years, they've been able to surge a lot of additional money into TDOT's budget to try to speed along some of those road projects. Well, you may not see that as much of that this year.
Yeah. And right now, according to some research that I was looking at, the state has a $38 million backlog in unfunded road projects, and TDOT has a long-term plan. But how do you do that without major tax increases? That's absolutely the never-ending question, right?
That's right. That's right. And so I think it'll be interesting as more and more burdens shift to the state. I think there will be ongoing debates on, well, does the state cover that? I think I read that Speaker Cameron Sexton told another outlet that, hey, maybe we look and see if we can do it cheaper. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But I imagine that will be a big topic this year, especially as the state has to take on some more of that money that they haven't typically had to do in the past.
All right, Chris Davis from News Channel 5 is our guest today on the Roundtable here on WGNS. Don't forget that after this is over, it will be on the podcast section, and you can go back and check our facts or re-listen, whatever you want to do. But we'll be back with our final segment with Chris Davis right after this as you listen to the Roundtable on WGNS.
Marker.
Whether it's a cough, a fever, or something you can't quite name, MMC Now makes care easy. Walk right in, get seen quickly, and your visit connects directly to your MMC doctor. care you trust, with providers you know, with digital check-in and multiple locations around town. MMC Now is here when you need us.
Murfreesboro Medical Clinic.
I've been helping people from Murfreesboro for over 30 years and spent a lot of time there over the years.
We love Murfreesboro. We have lots of friends down there. We've partnered with Middle Tennessee State.
And we found more and more people asking for our services, and at some point it just made sense to open up an office there for the convenience of the citizens of the community and the surrounding areas.
We wanted to actually physically be present there and not just going there a lot.
Sign-ups are going on right now for First Shot's Winter Basketball League in Rutherford County. Coach Andy Herzer guides kids to sharpen basketball skills and build teamwork through exciting clinics and games. Since 2003, First Shot has empowered youth to grow in mind, spirit, and body. Don't miss out. Join the fun and develop lifelong skills. Visit firstshottn.org today and register for the Winter Basketball League. That's firstshottn.org.
Do your sinus infections always seem to come back no matter what you do? The pressure builds, the headaches drag on, the congestion makes it hard to sleep, hard to focus, hard to feel like yourself. Here's what most people don't actually know. Sinus infections keep coming back because your sinuses can't fully drain. That's why the pressure, the headaches, and the congestion keep coming back time and time again. Balloon sinuplasty gently opens your sinuses in a quick, in-office procedure, so the infections can finally clear. At Murfreesboro Sinus Center, they've helped thousands of patients break free from the sinus infection cycle, so you can breathe easier, sleep better, and finally feel like yourself again. Don't wait another season fighting sinus pain. Call Murfreesboro Sinus Center today at 615-649-4590 to see if balloon sinuplasty is right for you. Call 615-649-4590. That's 615-649-4590.
This is Chip Walters, and I'm honored to be your 2024 MTAR Realtor of the Year. I'm with Exit Realty Bob Lamb & Associates, and like many of you, I've seen the real estate market shift and change. People often ask, Chip, what's really going on? Well, that's a great question, and I believe in answering with solid, factual data. So let's cut through some of the noise. I invite you to reach out. Let's have a conversation about your real estate goals and the current market trends in your neighborhood. You can find all my contact information at choosechip.net.
This is the Roundtable from News Radio WGNS on FM 101.9 and AM 1450 Murfreesboro, FM 100.5 Smyrna. Listen and watch at wgnsradio.com.
Welcome back to our final segment on the Roundtable with Chris Davis of News Channel 5, the Capitol Hill reporter. He is right now getting himself in shape, getting himself in gear for the legislative session the gavel will fall next Tuesday. Then they'll get underway. We've talked about healthcare, we've talked about roads, we've talked about immigration. One of the first things that will happen during this legislative session will be Governor Lee's State of the State address. This will be his final State of the State address. Have you gotten any inkling on how does he want to spend this final year in office? Is it one of those where he feels like, not that he's lame duck, but is it where he can push an agenda, or is this a pet project type of year, or is this where he floats out big dreams? What do you anticipate?
I think one thing for certain that we will hear the governor talk about for the State of the State, which is certainly what he hopes will be his legacy, is school choice and vouchers. And so he was able to finally get that across the finish line last year in a special session. And we saw the first year they were able to roll it out pretty quickly. And this school year was the first year that students could apply for those school choice scholarships,
Spooky
as they like to call
everywhere.
them.
How do you
they
plan
gave
to find the hidden
20,000
treasure?
slots, and they had 40,000 apply. And I know the governor has mentioned, I know some state lawmakers have mentioned they would like to expand that program to give more people that opportunity. But here we go, back to the budget. Because it might be a tighter budget year. I know at least Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally has said it all depends on what is left over when we have to pay all of our other departments. And so I think that will be a big debate this year. There's a lot of special interest money in that topic. And so there will be a lot of lawmakers that feel like they need to support that, but the budget has to support it too. But I know that the governor will be pushing for more slots. I think it all kind of depends on how many. They built into the apparatus of the school choice bill that there would be modest increases into how many scholarships they offer, but they want to, I have heard some numbers as much as double the amount that they offer, which would be very expensive in the budget. So that will be definitely something that I think the governor links himself to with his legacy and is something that he's been pushing for his entire administration.
So what was it? 20,000 slots at what, $7,000 each? Is that what that?
I think it was maybe $7,600 scholarships.
Okay,
I think. Yeah,
got you. And I haven't read the list, but I think the Tennessean put out a list of which private schools received the most of those scholarships, and you know, you can imagine that the development directors and the admissions people at private schools are, you know, they the ones who do the best job of helping, you know, potential enrollees, you know, go through that process, the better off they're going to be. So I get that, but that's obviously a political football that on every level, whether it's at the state level or even at the county level, or school district level, it's there. But you're right, that has probably been Governor Lee's. That's the one thing he really, if you had to pick out one thing, that's the one thing he's really wanted to have is his legacy.
No question. He talks about it all the time. Anytime he's in front of usually reporters, that topic comes up. It's something that he personally very much believes in. It has certainly been a central part of his focus. I think on the Democratic side of things, and I think this has a hard road ahead, but also there were some Republicans that supported this last year too. There was talk about potentially eliminating the grocery sales tax. I think with a tighter budget year, that's a harder road to plow, but you saw even names like House Majority Leader William Lamberth put his name behind that idea as a way to help save Tennesseans money. Problem is, everybody likes lower taxes, but you still got to have taxes to run the state, and that is a big source of revenue. So I think that one will be talked about, but it'll be interesting to see if that is able to move forward. And you haven't seen some of the bigger names like the speakers of the houses or even the governor put their name behind that. And sometimes that's an indication of how serious is this really, kind of thing.
Yeah. One thing that is going into effect this year, one of the new laws is Savannah's law, and the domestic violence registry, which we already have the child sex abuse registry. This domestic abuse registry that has gotten pretty broad-based support.
Absolutely. You know, you didn't see, I don't remember the final vote, but I don't think it may have even been unanimous, which doesn't happen a whole lot up there, but it does. And you've even seen, we were talking earlier about how states will sometimes mirror each other. There are states that are following Tennessee's lead on that and wanting to establish a domestic violence registry for their own. It's interesting, much like how the sex offender registry works, the more indictments, well, not necessarily indictments, convictions you get, the longer you would stay on that registry. I think you have to at least have 2 convictions to make it. But the idea is, as it sounds, if someone's, trying to go on a blind date and just see about someone's history, that may help them, may hopefully prevent someone from getting into a similar situation that others have been in. So, it's not all cutthroat up on the Hill. It sometimes appears that way. Sometimes it feels that way when you're reporting it, but there are moments where it's a common sense thing, or if it just transcends political boundaries. And that was one that was actually kind of refreshing to cover of, hey, we can afford this. We can do this. Let's do this.
Yeah. And for Governor Lee, that'll be a nice legacy to have too, if it helps make other folks safer along the way. Now, with his term coming to an end, that means that there will be an election, and the question may be, is this one over before it ever starts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Chip. No question that Senator Marsha Blackburn comes in with a huge advantage. She's been in politics for as long as I've been alive, and for many of your listeners, as long as they've been alive. She's, at every level from the community level, state level, federal level, and now hoping to become Tennessee governor. She certainly comes in an advantage, but it ain't over until it's over. And Representative John Rose does have a lot of name recognition, at least in his part of the state. He's got a lot of money. He can finance a lot of his own campaign. So his folks would definitely tell you it's not over. But that will be a very interesting primary, and we'll see. I will say that Marsha Blackburn has done a very good job of. She is very close to a lot of members of the legislature. And if you look at her endorsement list, there are many, many Republican members of the state legislature that are on that list. And so it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. But that will certainly play a role in all of this, because the Governor Bill Lee certainly still has lots of dreams and hopes. Like you mentioned, they keep pretty tight wraps on what he'll say on the State of the State until the day of. And so you hear rumors, but you don't really know until he says it. And so I'm sure he'll have initiatives, but because this is his last year, he does not have quite the same political heavyweight status as he did a few years ago. And so we'll see how that all plays in. And we have certainly seen moments where the governor and the legislature have not been in lockstep. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
And, it's a couple of things. When Bill Lee ran for governor 8 years ago, here was a guy that owned an HVAC company, a very successful HVAC company, and had not been a county commissioner, had not been a state legislator, but all of a sudden he wins the governor's race, and time will tell how it will judge. He's had to go through a lot of stuff. He's had to go through the pandemic. He's had to go through the Covenant school shooting, a lot of things that have been on his plate, and frankly, things you would not wish on anybody. So it will be interesting as time judges how his legacy as a two-term governor comes about.
Absolutely. And I think he's starting to think about that a little bit more than he used to. When you ask him questions at some of his media availabilities, he's starting to become a little bit more circumspect, which I think is just kind of the life cycle of lawmakers as they kind of near an end, especially when you have one like the governor that is term limited. We don't have term limits in the legislature. And so for a lot of those individuals, unless they feel like they have a big challenge coming, they can sometimes act like they're going to be there as long as they want to be there. And sometimes that is the case. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they are. For example, Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, I believe, is entering in his 51st year in the legislature, both in the House and the Senate. So some are, when they say they're lifers, they are. And then others think they are. And a primary challenger pushes things in another direction.
Any idea what Governor Lee might want to do post governorship? You look in what Phil Bredesen and Bill Haslam have done. Bill Haslam now, majority owner of the Nashville Predators, and he and Governor Bredesen have, I think, one of the best podcasts going. If you like politics at all, I love their talk. You may be right, and it promotes across the aisle politics. But
and if I can touch on that for just a second,
go right ahead.
I'll get to your first question first. But I was covering Governor Winfield Dunn's funeral. I believe it was either last year or the year before, and we were kind of on door patrol of going into First Presbyterian in Nashville, and I believe it was. Yes, it was Governor Phil Bredesen that arrived first. And I was able to lure him over to the camera and give some remarks about what he thought about Governor Dunn. And while we were doing the interview, Bill Haslam arrived and walked behind his shot and stood off to the side. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect, because then I can ask Governor Haslam. And Governor Haslam said to me, he goes, oh, I don't care about doing the interview. I mean, I will. And he did eventually. He goes, but I just want to be able to walk in with my friend Phil. And so I just wanted to point that out, as it's not just a show for the podcast either. Those two have genuinely become friends in their post governorships and are in a unique club, that few are in Tennessee. And I just thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being said, what do you see in your crystal ball in Governor Lee's future?
I don't know. It's a great question. I have asked him a couple times, and every time he goes, "Oh, I'm just looking forward to being back on the farm." His longtime family farm in Williamson County. I don't know. I could see it going either way. I could see him saying, "You know what? I've accomplished what I want to do. I'm going to go be a grandfather." I could also see him having higher aspirations. Officially on the record, he has said he's headed to the farm, but we'll see. That'll be definitely something interesting to see.
Well, he has been in lockstep with the president, and you could see, you could easily, I think, with 3 years remaining in the Trump administration, you could easily see an ambassadorship or something like that as kind of a payback to him by the president for being supportive of him. So it'll be interesting to see. One final thing, we're entering our 250th year as a country. July 4th will be a massive celebration across the state and across the country. Any idea of anything special that the state is going to be doing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know about official plans. I do know, speaking of Governor Bill Lee, is one of his initiatives for the 250th has been to visit all 95 counties. And he actually, last time I interviewed the governor, it was when he was doing his stop in Cheatham and Robertson counties. So he's slowly kind of making his way to make sure that he's specifically, and sometimes the first lady, when she can get away, visit all 95 counties and find something within that county to celebrate, whether it's a beloved restaurant, whether it's a farm, whatever it may be. I'm sure the state has something planned. I don't know if they've released that just yet or if I've missed it, but I know that 250 is very much on the mind of Tennessee leaders. So I would not surprise me if we have just as big of a 4th of July celebration as some of the other big cities, and that may have the state's label on it too.
Yeah, Nashville always has a great one anyway. Okay, last thing, what is the best barbecue or gas station food that you have had most recently?
That's a good one, Chip.
You're a connoisseur of both, as am I.
Well, I will say, and I'll always put a plug in for this because this is a hometown favorite. So if you're ever in Montgomery County, XL Barbecue, it is in a gas station. It does not look like much from the road, but they have phenomenal barbecue. They have phenomenal homemade pies.
There we go.
That is one of my favorites. I would say next one that was most recent when it was up in Waverly, Overholt's Family Market, I believe is their name. They are actually run by a Mennonite family, and you can do some of those custom sandwiches, and those are delicious as well. But there are lots of great places all through Tennessee you can find them.
It's one of the byproducts of your job that you get to go find a lot of those good spots. We are always smarter after Chris Davis joins us on the Roundtable. Chris, thanks so much, and good luck with the legislature starting next week.
Thank you. I will take all the luck I can get.
Chris Davis joins us. Don't forget, you can relive all of this on the podcast section of wgnsradio.com. Back next week with another episode here on the Big G, WGNS.
WGNS, Murfreesboro, Smyrna. Subscribe to Big G TV, local content that matters to Rutherford County.